The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Welcome in to this all-new edition of the, I got to make sure I get this right. It's the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. And we have a little bit different lineup for you today, but you have no worries. Vince is spending much time needed and necessary and deserved time with his family. But I am your co-host. I've slid over to the other chair. I'm Kevin Wilson. And coming in to save the day, it's I'm going to talk you up. You know that, Chase. So it's the ninth inning. We've got the lead, and we're bringing in our all-star closer. We're signaling to the bullpen. And coming in is our defending league champion here. So you're definitely going to want to sit up and pay attention right now. My good friend, Mr. Chase Thornton. Chase, how are you doing this evening?
Excellent. Hey, glad to be back on Belly Up Media here on the Sports Stove Show with you and my good friend Kevin Wilson here. Yeah, hey, it's like old times. Hey, we're back. We're ready to go. I'm ready to talk about some baseball. Lots of hot action going on. It's been a big weekend between the London series and everything else that's been going on. So
that's right. We've got, as you mentioned, the London series we'll be talking about, and we'll be talking about some all-star actions, some standings. And, of course, at the end, we'll talk about our ads and drops. But first, we are going to go to our – here it comes. That's right. It's the Fantasy Burner. And burner is an appropriate topic for today because, it's June. And even though the official summer starts whenever that is, a couple weeks, whatever it is, but trust me when I say that it is summer here in Texas, okay? And so I thought that an appropriate conversation to get started in June was that we would look at some hitters that are heating up and that we've needed to heat up, a lot of us. And so maybe guys that you're going to want to take a look at. Some of the guys that I'm talking about are pretty much available. So I'll be talking about some pitcher-heavy ads when we get to that part of the show, just to drop that in there. But so we're going to start off with some hot hitters right now. And so, Chase, who do you have at the top of your list of hitters that are hot, that you see staying hot for the summer?
Well, Guy, happily, I kind of mentioned him in the pregame here, but happily a guy that's been heating up, and he's on my roster here for this year so far. Alex Bregman for the Houston Astros, a guy that had started out and had been pretty disappointing through the first month and a half of the season or so there. Guy that you drafted really high, that I drafted out certainly really high, and you were hoping to be one of the mainstays and stalwarts of your lineup there. Started off really slow, really disappointed, but hey, over the last 3 weeks or so here, his last 20, 25 games or so, he's got 8 home runs out of his 9 on the season. 8 of them have come here in the last, like I said, about 3-week stretch here. He looks like he's finally back on the horse, ready to go. Alex Bregman, a guy that, you might still be able to convince his owner that he's been a disappointment. And maybe, if you can work that trade line a little bit, you might be able to get him for below cost. But if you don't do it quick, it's not going to happen because he does look like the last 3 weeks or so, he's starting to look like the hitter that we all drafted. So Alex Bregman, a guy that I can see sticking around.
Well, he's a guy that Vince and I have talked about previously, and we believed in him before the season began because he was a free agent to be. So I agree with you that he's a guy that's going to heat up. The Astros, I still expect, are going to heat up. So that's a guy, if I have him as you, then they're really going to have to come in with an offer to really blow my socks off. But the first player I'm going to talk about is one that I brought up last week. And last week we did our show about players that started hot but had started to cool off. And the top player that I mentioned was Marcus Simeon of the local Texas Rangers. And so we have no worries, though, because he took a day off, which he never does. That broke his he was leading all of the majors in consecutive starts when he sat out on a Wednesday a week ago, a week and a half, whatever it is. But since then, he has hits in 8 of 9 games. He's been on base in all 9. He has runs in 6 of 9 games. He's hit 2 home runs, including today. So I am happy to report, because Marcus Simeon is a guy that I have on my team. I've drafted him 2 years running now, and he took the day off. That'll be his last day off for the rest of the year. So I'm quite pleased that he is heated up. And so as with, you really have to come in with an offer to me. So I'm not moving Marcus Simeon. So he's my top guy that I have as far as hitters heating up right now. So who do you got at number 2?
Well, another guy I want to talk about, Kid Brian Hayes for the Pirates, a guy that he was kind of on our radars, then kind of off our radars. He had a streak, he had a stint here on the injured list here a while back, but this dude, since he came off the injured list, about 10 days ago, 29th, I think, of May, he came off the injured list here. He has a home run, 4 steals since he came off the injured list a couple weeks ago. Starting to kind of feel himself again, starting to get himself back raring to go. And if you remember last year, Brian Hayes had a pretty big second half of the season. He came on late. So it looks like he's healthy, looks like he could start to roll here, and looking forward to a second half of the season from Brian Hayes. And they need it in that offense, that Pirate offense. They've been, as a team, a bit of a disappointment here. But if they can get him rolling again, that could really do some things for them in a still competitive NL Central. So.
Yeah, we definitely got some things to talk about when we get to that division. And so, because the Pirates are getting the pitching, obviously. So if they can get some hitting, that would be great for them. I'm going to go with my second guy is one of the Pirates' rivals. That's the Cincinnati Reds. And I know that if Vince is watching this, he's like, oh, come on, Kevin, why are you talking about Cincinnati? But this guy deserves to be talked about. I'm talking about Hamir Candelario. He's the first and third baseman for them. And just so you know, once we get finished with this, you can go to your league. He's at 17% rostered right now. So he's a guy that you could add. I have him on my team. Quite pleased with that. And you might say, well, why is that? Let's see. Entering today, since May 27th, he's got hits in 11 of 12 games. And 2 hits he had in 4 of 5 games. And then he has 6 runs, 4 home runs, 7 RBIs. He's even stolen 2 bases. And so in 6 games before today, he has 27 fantasy points. So if you need any help at first or third base, there are few players that are playing those positions that are as hot as Candelario is. So if you need any help, that's where I would turn and get him on my roster. Like I said, don't do it right now. And if you're in our league and you're watching this, don't try it because I already have him. But he's a guy that is heating up. And in Cincinnati, that ballpark is a hitter's park to begin with. And once that heat starts hitting in Cincinnati, he is going to be a player that you're going to want on your team.
Sounds good. All
right. So who do you have at the number 3 position?
Well, last guy I'll bring up here in the number 3 position, Teoscar Hernandez for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, listen, this is a dude that I had him low coming into the season. I had him low on my draft rankings because, listen, we know the guy can hit the ball, from here to Dallas. But the thing about Teoscar Hernandez is I was worried about his strikeout rates. I was worried about negative numbers. And part of my philosophy coming into this season was to minimize negative points from those guys that were going to be high strikeout or ground into double play type guys. But Teoscar Hernandez really has been a big surprise this season in terms of how often he's been able to get on base and score positive points for you. I mean, he's had a hell of a week here this week. Last night he had a pair of home runs yesterday, 17-point game for you. He had another pair of points today. He's had another home run earlier this week on the 6th. Just a guy that really, like I said, has been a surprise in terms of how little he's striking out compared to what you thought he was. And he's been actually very, very consistent. He's been really hot here the last week or two. Teoscar Hernandez is in the middle of a great lineup. Who do you pitch around in the Dodgers lineup? You can't pitch around anybody in the Dodgers lineup. And so as long as he's, able to stay healthy and stay there in the middle of that, I'm all in on him. I'm very thrilled that I was able to get him at 246 overall because he's far outplayed his draft slot for me. I can tell you that right now.
I agree with that. And, you probably may not see it, but Dodgers is where I come from.
There you go.
And so I didn't even was in his corner going into the season for the reasons why you outlined. I was worried about his strikeouts, but he's got that under control.
Yeah.
And so he's going to have guys on base. We know this. So he's a guy that I like a lot. And so I'm going to bring up a guy right here. As we all know, Acuna is out for the season. Yes. We know that. It's one of the sorrier aspects that we've had this year. But I wrote an article that of some guys that had potential. You don't replace Acuna, of course, but you needed to replace him on your roster. The guy that I came up with was Alex Burleson. Yeah. And so for St. Louis, okay, outfield, DH. And for a while there, that looked like if you went to his stat page, you'd be like, well, Kevin don't know what he's talking about.
What the hell is this all about? Yeah.
Yeah. What is happening here? But because he was in an 0 for 17 slump. So if you said, hey, forget Kevin, he don't know what he's talking about, and you dropped him, well, since then he has hits in 7 of 8 games. He scored runs twice in 3 straight games this week, homered in 3 straight, and RBIs in 4 straight. Okay, 33 fantasy points during this period. That is as hot as it gets right there. And St. Louis was a team that Vince was very happily, was in last. But they're starting to come around, and we know St. Louis gets hot. That ballpark gets hot in the summertime. So if you're still looking for a guy to replace Acuna, Alec Burleson is a guy that I would look at right now to get on your team. He's at 9.5% rostered, so he is available almost everywhere. So he's a guy that I would be very interested in if I was Mike Brown, because he drafted him, Acuna. And if he hasn't replaced him yet, Alec Burleson goes right to the top of my list.
There you have it.
All right. So you have any other players?
Not anybody that I'm super I mean, I've got one that I was going to talk about in our waiver pickups later on. I'll save that. I'll save that one for later.
Okay, you'll
got
save
somebody
that
else
part.
spit it out here. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. There's some players for you, and we are going to transition now, though, and we're going to talk about some real baseball. And while we're doing that, hang on a second. Let me bring this up over here. We're going to call to the pen. This is our call to the pen segment. I don't know where Vince came up with that, but that's a quality call of the pen right there. So, all right. So we are going to lead off this portion because, as we're all aware, the London series completed today, and it was between Philadelphia and the New York Mets, or the Mets, as we referred to them last week on this very show. And so it was appropriate. And so a lot of people were figuring, because they're still enamored about what happened, 5 years ago now, when they first played this series over there, and Boston and New York played that very first series. But fortunately for me, I read that they had changed the field since then. So a lot of people went to add hitters that they probably shouldn't have done. And because, let's see, the first game was Philadelphia 7, Mets 2. Doesn't seem like it matters very much where Ranger Suarez is pitching right now. Could be on Mercury for all he cares, as he won the game for them. And so Philadelphia, they're still flying high, even though today, I don't know if you saw this, that they had a lead going into the ninth inning, and Mr. Alvarado came in and blew the save, and the Mets won the game 6-5. So that is a total of 20 runs right there in the two games. Unlike the Yankees and Boston, which scored 50 in the two games. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit different. Let's see. In 2023, last year, the Cubs and the Cardinals played and scored 22 runs. So going forward, this is a trend that you can see when the London series comes around. You don't want to double down on your hitters because it was cooler than usual there, I read.
It's not Mexico City. Yeah, it's not a launching pad like I think a lot of people maybe thought it was going to be.
That's right. So what were your takeaways from these two games?
I thought it was really fun. I thought it was a successful series to take over there. I mean, obviously you've got the top team and top record in baseball right now with Philadelphia, 45-20 now after today. But as you mentioned, game one there, 7-2 Phillies, 21 hits in that game between the two teams. It wasn't like there was a huge lack of offense and 9 runs. I mean, it wasn't a low scoring game, but they had a 6-run fourth inning for Philadelphia to break that thing open. Bryce Harper went 3 for 4 with a run, an RBI, finished a triple short of the cycle. And of course, I don't know if anybody saw the replay of it, but after he hit his home run, he had a big soccer celebration where he slid around and acted like a soccer player, which is always, they do that kind of stuff to play up for over there and have some fun over there. I saw that today. I guess the opening pitch for today's game wasn't necessarily an opening pitch. It was like an opening double play where the co-owner of the Wrexham soccer team and his wife turned a double play with Chase Utley and Bryce Harper, I guess, or something like that. I mean, they like to have fun and play it up over there, but they had almost 109,000 people for the two games. So it was well received, I think. As you mentioned there, Suarez, 5 2/3, 8 hits. He didn't pitch a drop dead game, but
no,
he keeps being effective. Only gave up 2 earned runs, only had 1 walk, struck out 6. First guy to 10 wins right now in the major league. So yeah, he's rolling. Meanwhile, the Mets, left 11 guys on base. I mentioned there were 21 hits in the game. They had 10 of them. It wasn't like they lacked for guys on base. They just couldn't bring them around. Lindor, Alonso, Marte all went 2 for 4. They all had a double. Sean Manaea couldn't close the deal on anything there and had actually a pretty disastrous line. If you were trying to, I don't know why you would have streamed him against the Phillies offense, but if you did. Today's game though, heck yeah, 6-5 there with the Mets with a pair of 3-run innings, including the 9th inning to earn the split there. And honestly, if you look at it, I don't know how they did it. Taijuan Walker, who has had his own ups and downs and mostly downs this season and is not is not in a whole lot of people's good graces. Yeah. Honestly, his stat line comes out better than Suarez's from yesterday in terms of he pitched 5 2/3 the same way. He only gave up 2 hits, 2 earned runs, a walk, struck out 6 of his own, and kept them right there. It's just their bullpen kind of handed that thing away to the Mets. I mentioned a pair of 3-run innings, including the 9th inning there, and then Philadelphia squandered a bases loaded situation in the 9th inning. They actually bounced into a game-ending 2-3 double play. I don't know if anybody saw that, but bounced it right out in front of home plate there. The catcher grabbed it, stepped back on home plate, and then stepped to the side and kind of fired to first base to close it off. It was the first 2-3 double play, I guess they said, since like 2015 or something like that, where it was just the catcher being able to start the first end of it. Former Brewer, Eric Kratz, actually, but he was playing with the Phillies at the time, honestly. Interestingly enough, but Schwarber with a nice day today, 2 for 4 and a walk and a run. Still lead off, the weirdest leadoff weirdest guy to have in a leadoff position in
It is.
baseball,
And
but
I have him on my team, but I agree
works.
with you. I agree
But
with
it
you on
somehow
that.
works.
It does.
I picked him up last year, and I was thrilled to do it. But it's just a weird guy to have in a leadoff position. But hey, when you're the Phillies and you're 45-20, I guess you can do what you kind of feel like. David Dahl with a pinch hit home run today for them, so he's been a big topic of conversation lately since they called him up. That's his second home run of the season. So, but yeah, the Mets somehow pulled one out, and
that's
good for them. Blind squirrel found a nut over in London.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So there you go. And that just goes to show, one of the things that you have to consider when you've got relief pitchers on your team, on your fantasy team, is Alvarado -13 fantasy points. That's hard to make up.
That hurt.
That hurts a lot. So just to throw that out there. But it was a very successful series, and they're going to be doing that every year going forward now. So we have this to look forward to every year.
Did you see the dude's T-shirt? Did you see the one guy had a T-shirt?
I did see that,
where it said the British blew a 13 colony lead.
I did see that. Points for originality on that. And I guess you got to give him points because he actually wore that over there. So
yeah,
I don't think I'd be that ballsy. I'm just saying. All right, so there we have the London series, and so we're going to step into our standings in the AL East. The Yankees, of course, are playing right now, but depending on what they do later. But they've won 8 out of 10. Unfortunately for them, the Dodgers, fortunately for me, beat them the first 2 games of the series. But they're in front of Baltimore by 2 games, and if you're Baltimore, they're playing extremely well.
They're tightening it up. They have tightened it up.
They've won 7 out of 10, but they can't gain any ground. So, because like I said, the Yankees have won 8 out of 10. Then you slide back to Boston. They're 12 out. They're 500. And then Toronto's at 13 games out. -37 is a run differential. That really gets me right there because you expect more out of their offense than that. And then Tampa's 13.5 out, -55. So anything in this division that really stands out to you?
No, but I mean, like you said, I think we all thought that Toronto, Tampa. I think we expected most of the teams in this division to be more competitive than they look in the bottom half there. The Red Sox, whatever they do is gravy on top of it, I guess. I for one wasn't expecting them to go a whole hell of a long way. But like you said, if you think back to the segment we opened the show with and the guys who are heating up and that, you notice there weren't a whole lot of Blue Jays and Rays on the roster there.
Yeah.
Couple of offenses that are disappointed, couple of, Tampa Bay, they're not getting the pitching that, that they would like to get and that they have to get as a small market team or a team that operates small markets. So yeah, I mean, Yankees, what do you say? They're good. And the Orioles are good too.
And so our friend Brett, who's in our league and has his own show, you might want to go to YouTube and check that out. But he was that convinced about the Yankees. But ever since this bell rang, they played well. And so when we move to the AL Central, you've got Cleveland at a +89 run differential. Then you've got Kansas City at +77. They're 4 games out. And just to toot my own horn a little bit, I was on Kansas City before the season began. I thought they'd be pretty good, and they are. And then you've got Minnesota. Minnesota is at a -12 run differential. And you just don't know what you're going to get out of Minnesota because they win a bunch of games, and then all of a sudden they turn right around and go straight in the can. And but they're 8.5 out now. I don't think they're not a challenge in this division. And Detroit's a disappointment at 10.5. I expected more out of them at -14. And the White Sox, do we even need to really bring them up? Thanks to the Red Sox, they beat them 2 out of 3 this weekend to break that 14 game losing streak. I'm pretty sure we could get together a team that would lose 14 in a row.
They could lose. Yeah, they could lose at least 12 or 13. But.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty confident we could get that together. And you wouldn't have to pay us $1 million. A couple thousand would get it done.
I keep seeing people like ask, well, we're starting to get to that. We got about a month left here till the trade deadline. People are starting to, well, who's going to be buyers and sellers, and who can the White Sox? Yeah, exactly. Who the hell can the White Sox even give away right now and get any kind of return? I mean, people have brought up Tommy Pham, I guess, and Eric Fetty is actually pitching halfway decent. But I mean, there's not a whole lot there, and there's not a whole lot, in the cupboard right now for them. White Sox are an absolute train wreck right now.
It's really too bad because I grew up in Indiana, right there on the border of Illinois,
Sure.
and
Yep.
I used to go to Cubs games, of course, but I also went to some White Sox games. So to see them this awful really, really hurts. And so,
honestly, they're a lineup that I try. I've been chasing them, or at least keeping my eye on chasing them for streaming pitchers. Because
right.
we have 9 pitchers, per day in our league, and I don't have 9 starting pitchers that are going to, fill that out. So as I'm looking at who I'm going to stream for the week, I'm keeping an eye on that White Sox team. That's one of the teams I'm chasing in terms of my, streaming starters, or for that matter, my relievers as well. Although you got to kind of look at your longer relievers because teams are beating them so damn bad. It's not like guys are getting saves against the White Sox. They don't need to.
No. And so then we switch to the AL West, which is, to me, is the most disappointing division in the American League. You've got Seattle out in front, but they're only at +5. So it's not like they're not a juggernaut like the Yankees by any stretch of the imagination. Texas is 5 back. They're +8 is all they are. And then Houston's at +8. They're 6 back. I still expect them to do something at some point. Oakland, 10.5, -73. And then you've got the Angels at 11.5, -62. So what do you see in this division going forward? Seattle, can they win the division, or are you looking for someone else to take over?
Well, I think they can, but yeah, I'm just baffled by this division with the Rangers and the Astros looking so just mediocre and like just not scary at all offensively, pitching wise, the whole bit. I mean, we know that, Texas has gone out and signed these free agent pitchers the last couple of years, hoping they would have an absolute juggernaut of a rotation. And we know how that's worked out or hasn't worked out for them, but, and nobody expected anything from the Athletics or the Angels, but, I mentioned earlier, Bregman heating up for the Astros. Yordan Alvarez is looking good for the Astros. If their offense can kind of pick things up a little bit, they've had bad luck with their starting pitching too. Christian Javier now going to have
That's
to
right.
have,
He's out.
Yep, with Tommy John and that. But if their offense can kind of pick things up, they could still make a run, and they've got the experience where it's old hat for them. And of course, the Rangers are the defending champions, but speaking of guys that need to get hot for their teams, I mean, Julio Rodriguez in Seattle, if that dude ever figures it out again, their offense could still take off. So I think this could be a 3-horse race here for the rest of the season. I don't think Seattle runs away with it, and I don't think Texas and Houston are going anywhere. In fact, it would not shock me to see in the next month or so Houston take a run at this thing and get themselves back in the mix.
I've been waiting for that all summer, so hopefully they'll heat up. So in the NL, we've got, of course, Philadelphia. They're at +109. Atlanta's 9 back at +34. Has there ever been a team that's been beaten up more with the injury bug than the Atlanta Braves? It's been tough on them. And then the rest of the division, Washington's 15 back. The Mets are 16.5. Miami's at 23 back. And so Atlanta, do you see them being able to make – because I mentioned last week, because Vince asked me, how many teams do you see in the National League being World Series contenders? How many do you see?
World Series contenders?
Yeah.
Serious World Series contenders, it's the Phillies, the Dodgers, and then kind of everybody else.
Okay,
to be dead honest with you.
That's what he was saying. And I was still saying Atlanta, you still got to put them in there, because I think they're going to make some moves and shore up some things.
Depending on the moves they make here in the next month, that could be interesting. But I don't know how you make moves that make up for the idea that you lost Spencer Strider, maybe the top pitcher in baseball, and Ronald Acuna Jr.
top hitter in baseball.
Right.
Oh.
2 of the top 5 picks in fantasy this season just wiped
Yeah.
off the board.
Yeah, trust me, I know about top 5 pick because that was my pitcher, my very first
dude,
draft. Yeah. So, but so that's what's going on in the NL East, the NL Central. Now we're getting into some really thorny situations. Of course, Milwaukee is in front, no doubt about that. You got Chicago is at 6.5 out, but they're minus 16 in their run differential. They have started to crater. And then you've got Cincinnati at 6.5 out. Then you've got St. Louis at 6.5 out. Then you've got the Pittsburgh Pirates, who we've been writing off ever since they started to go downhill after that good start, but they're only 7 out.
Yeah.
So in other words, there's a half game that separates second place through 4th place. And so who do you see coming out of that mess and finishing second in that division?
I'm not biased at all. I mean, at all.
Not biased at all. No worries there.
I don't know how the Brewers are doing it. They've pieced their starting rotation together with duct tape and chicken wire, and dudes that nobody's heard of. And I follow the team, and I haven't heard of half of these dudes. But honestly, their offense has been such a surprise. It's been so consistent. Before coming into that Phillies series, I mean, you were talking about the 2 teams with the most runs in baseball, and that they got swept by the Phillies, but they didn't get blown. Nobody got blown out in that series. The games were 2-1, 2-0. It was a very hard fought series. I think the Brewers have what it takes to come out of the Central, but they are not. I don't think they're going to run away with it because they just don't have the starting pitching to do that. I'm looking for them in the next month here to make a move, at least one move. They've shown that they're not afraid to make those kinds of mid-season moves for a guy. They didn't make that kind of move. They made a move that ended up hurting the team morale a couple years ago when they let go of Hader at the trade deadline, but they are not afraid of making big moves at the deadline. So if they can pick up another starting pitcher here just to eat some innings and be a little consistent. I mean, they've been using starters and bulk relievers and all kinds of, those kinds of tricks to get 27 outs, kind of taking a page or keeping a page out of the departed Craig Counsell's book. But somehow they're getting 27 outs most nights. And, I can see them sticking around and coming and still coming out of this as the leader in the clubhouse. Cubs, I don't have a whole lot of faith in. The Cardinals, I don't have a whole lot of faith in. I didn't have a lot of faith in the Reds. They were kind of a trendy pick coming into the year. And honestly, they have started to pick things up. They have tightened it up. They've come from 4th and are now, like you said, tied with the Cubs and the Cardinals. And the Reds are the one team where if things break right for them, they have a decent balance. And I think that they can hit better than they have. I think they can pitch better than they have. I think that there is enough there for the Reds to challenge and at least be in the wild card mix, if not challenging for the top of the division by the end of the season here.
All right. Well, since we're talking about the NL Central and the Cubs, we've got a section that we need to get into. Now, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but Vince has made it quite clear that Craig Counsell, of course, was the Brewers manager. He was the Brewers player. He's from Milwaukee. And, of course, he went to Chicago. And because of that, lightning flashed from heaven, okay, and came down to earth to strike down the Chicago Cubs and anyone that's affiliated with them. And so, as I mentioned, that's about 30 miles from where I grew up. So I have to, make sure I have my hands off. And so it's interesting because the Cubs, like I said, were right there with the Brewers for a while, but that has come off the rails. And so what's your take on the Counsell curse and the Cubs right now?
Well, so far so good. If you're me and Vince, if you're a Brewer fan, I mean they're 4-6 in their last 10. Like you said, they've lost a little bit of ground. They came out of that. It was a disastrous series with the Brewers here last week, and actually, allowed the Brewers to open up a kind of a nice lead in that division there. They're 32-34 overall, like you said, 6.5 behind the Brewers. Negative 14 run differential. Last season, they ended the year up 96, plus 96 in run differential. So obviously they're not having the same kind of luck offensively or defensively or pitching wise that they had last season. And in a move that doesn't break my heart as a Brewer fan, but is affecting my fantasy lineup, Nico Horner now has a small fracture in his hand.
That's right. I was going to bring him up.
He's missing some time. So
that's right. Because on Thursday, he was hit by a pitch, and I know Vince talked about the curse and everything else, but I drafted Nico Horner anyway in my other league that I'm in, and so I was riding the ups and downs. But yeah, he's been out of the lineup the last 3 days because he got hit by a pitch, and so he's the latest. And he was one of the ones that Vince mentioned predominantly would be cursed this year. And so it has now happened.
And he started out the year slow too. He didn't start out real great. He has picked it up lately, but then like you said, now he's got this slight fracture in his hand that they say the doctors are comfortable with him playing through. But that seems like a real iffy proposition, batting and catching and throwing with a fracture in your hand as a professional athlete there. But yeah, it does seem like their luck has changed since last year a little bit.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know if I blame Craig for that necessarily, but hey, I mean, if Vince says they're cursed, I'm all for that.
Okay, so we switch over to the NL West, where of course the Dodgers are in first. They've got plus 94, and then comes the disappointing teams to me. I'm glad they're disappointing. Okay, don't get me wrong, because you got San Diego is 8 out at plus 25. San Francisco is 9 out, but they're minus 23. So that's an ultimate mirrors and smoke and everything else situation. And they beat the Rangers here 2 out of 3 this weekend. Then you've got Arizona, one of the most disappointing teams at 10.5 out. They're minus 19 on their run differential. And the Rockies, we don't even need to bring them up. And so San Diego, San Francisco, Arizona. Do you see any of those three heating up?
Well, it has been interesting because, I mean, two of the big free agent pitcher signings, Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell, there are guys that have absolutely not produced at all here for the Giants and the Diamondbacks. Padres just don't seem like they can get out of their own way.
No, it's been that way for a few years now.
Yeah, like there's all the talent in the world there in the rotation, in the bullpen, in the lineup, and they just don't seem like they can, like I said, get out of their own way. Now Machado's hitting better a little bit better lately. I guess of the three, San Diego is the team just because of how much talent is on that team. They're the team that I could see making a little bit of a run, not necessarily at the division, but I think they'll be right there for the playoffs as we, when we approach the wild cards. San Francisco needs to get, they need to get better pitching out of Snell. They need to get better pitching kind of period. But the Diamondbacks, their lineup needs to improve tremendously. I mean, Corbin Carroll has been one of the biggest disappointments in the entire league, not just fantasy wise, but I mean, reality wise. They need to get him on. He needs to be able to hit for that offense to have any kind of punch to it at all. The dude can still run. And if he's been an interesting case. If you look at his spray chart, he's still hitting the ball all over the field. But if you look at Corbin Carroll's spray chart, there is a big, wide open, giant gap in deep center field where there is nothing. He's not squaring the ball up. That's what that tells you. He's not squaring the ball up. He's not making good, hard contact, and he's not seeing the ball well, which is why nothing's going straight back up the middle with any kind of power whatsoever. But yeah, I really don't see San Francisco or Arizona having the juice to make a run at anything more than third place in this division. And I don't necessarily see them fighting for the wild card like I do the Padres.
Okay, so that moves us to our last section, and that's All-Star Game voting. It's now open till June 27th, which just so happens to be my birthday. And then there's 2 phases of this, and I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this. The first phase goes to June 27th. The second phase goes from June 30th to July 3rd. And so who are a couple of players, and I have a few, who you think should be starters that more than likely will not.
Well, I got one in particular, and again, it's kind of a homer pick, but hear me out. I would
Okay.
like to see Bryce Terang start
He's
for the
on my
National
list.
League.
He's on my list, so preach it.
But unfortunately, I don't think he's going to, because I think he's going to be behind the one Diamondback who actually may be hitting in Ketel Marte there. Marte's got a big lead on him in home runs here, something like 14-3, I think it is. But I mean, Bryce Terang, his batting average, he leads all second basemen in the league, not just National League. Overall, he's 23 out of 24 in stolen base attempts. He's second in the majors in stolen bases, and he's only been caught one time. The dude has just had a kind of a coming out party this year. And it was kind of thing where Brewers manager Pat Murphy had made a reference to that in the preseason, that he thought that Bryce Terang was going to shock a lot of people this year and was going to be one of the cogs that drives their offense. And he has been that and more. Just one of the most reliable bats that they have in their whole offense. He had 4 hits the other night. But like I said, Marte with a big lead on him in home runs. Marte has also got about 50 more at bats than he does, though. So, I mean, you can't necessarily look at his counting numbers and think that, that it's just because Marte's having that much better of a year. He's got 50 more at bats than Terang has. Terang's kind of bounced between leadoff and the bottom of the order, weirdly enough. I think they're still searching for the best mix of how to get, how to spread out the wealth in that Brewers offense there. But Bryce Terang, a guy that is just and he's playing phenomenal defense at second base as well. But I just think that with the counting numbers and the slugging that Marte brings to the table, and Milwaukee being a little bit lower profile team than some of the others, I think you're probably going to see Ketel Marte or someone else take that starting spot in the National League. But I would love to see Terang take it.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I have him on my list, but the guy that leads so far for me, and maybe the fans will see, and I hate to bring up Padres. Okay, but Jurickson Profar,
Yep,
outfielder for the Padres, of course. And at the start of the day, he was number 1 in batting average. Okay, number 1. I don't think that's the case now, but it's him and Arias are 1 and 2. They're both in the same lineup. But at the start of the day, 319. He's got 9 homers. He's got 42 RBIs. He's 13th in hits. He's 16th in RBIs in the National League. And so if there's a player that deserves, then it's going to have a lot, because there's a lot of competition in the outfield, of course. But he goes to the top of my list, that Jurickson Profar should be a starter in the National League at the All-Star game. So those of you that are out there getting ready to vote, make sure you put his name on the list.
there you go.
Okay, so
Well, I got one more name that I think had a shot at until he got injured this season. Stephen Kwan, outfielder for the Indians there, or for the Guardians, I should say Guardians. Sorry,
I'm still saying Indians, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, it's one of those things where they
what is it, 3 years now, or however many years it's been? They're still Indians
right,
to me. So
right. Well, and I don't watch the American League as much anymore since we're over in the National League. But
that's right.
No, Stephen Kwan, a guy that, I mean, he'd just been raking the ball and hitting a ton, and was coming out like a bat out of hell, and then had the injury and missed quite a bit of time with the injury. Had he not gotten injured, I think he had a strong case to be a starter. He still could make it as a reserve. I think he deserves that at least. But I think he had a good case to be a starter had he not gotten injured there. Stephen Kwan, another guy that I would like to put out there as a possibility.
Okay. So before we move on, if I could just make an appeal to the fans out there, can you please not put Mike Trout in? Can we please not do that?
Yeah.
Okay. He's been hurt long enough now that the fan, it's not like they don't know. He's been out, and he should be nowhere near any kind of top 3, top 10 in the American League in the outfield. Please don't do that.
And he's not going to be able. He's not going to be able to be there, even if you want him. Yeah, even if you vote him in, he's not going to be.
Yeah, even if you vote him in, he won't be there. So don't cheapen the process. Keep him out, please. That's all I ask. Vote for whoever you want to, just not Mike Trout.
Vote for Yankees if you want to, even. Yep. I mean, heck, there's a good portion of them that deserve it. right now there are. But yeah, I agree. Don't vote for a guy just because his name.
Glad we got that straight and settled. And so we're going to move into our last segment. which is possibly the most popular segment of our show. So we're very excited about that. And that is, of course, our ads and drops. And that is our fantasy focus. All right. So, as I mentioned, this is the ads and drops section. And since you're coming in to save us in the ninth inning, what would you like to start, ads or drops?
Ads.
Okay,
Definitely with ads.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the top, I'm going pitcher heavy on my ads because some of my heating up hitters are available. So if you miss that, go back to the front of the show when we're done here, and you can get yourself some ads on hitters. But who do you have at the top of your list of ads for this week?
For this week, top of my list for ads this week is a guy, depending on the league you're in, he may or may not be available. He was available in our league until I grabbed him just honestly right before the show. Jordan Montgomery, a guy that we talked about, was a disappointment so far. And because he's been a disappointment, he may be available in your league, but he's got a 2-start week this week coming up here. If you're looking for streaming starting pitching, you can pick up 2 starts in one here. And those 2 starts are going to come against the Los Angeles Angels, who are an absolutely abysmal lineup themselves, and the Chicago White Sox that we talked about. So when you're facing two of the worst, you're a starting pitcher facing 2 of the worst lineups in the game. I know Jordan Montgomery hasn't done a whole heck of a lot this season, but he's got himself a get-right week if there ever was one here against the Angels and the White Sox. So that's somebody I'm targeting this week.
Okay, I'm glad that you brought him up because I'm going to go the opposite way when we get to the drop section.
There you go.
But we're in the ads right now. So the guy that's at the top of my list, we talked about the mess earlier, but we talked about him on the show last week, and that's Tyler McGill, starting pitcher for the New York Mets. He's at 6% rostered, and he's only at 1-2, but he has a 3 ERA, a 1.24 WHIP, and you talk about matchups. Tuesday against the Miami Marlins. And they're one of the sorrier offensive teams in all of baseball. And so we know what he did against the Dodgers. He pitched 10 innings of shutout, 3-hit baseball. Washington wasn't so good. Gave up 4 runs on 7 hits. But I'm willing to let him get a little pass on that because he's got to start against Miami this week. And he's available, which is key when we talk. You can't add somebody if they're not available. So right. At 6% rostered, Tyler McGill goes at the top of my list. So who do you have at number 2?
Another guy. It's another 2-start pitcher I got on the list here. Spencer Arrighetti for the Houston Astros. His 2 starts are going to come against the Giants and the Tigers this week. Both of those teams are in the lower half of the league in terms of their OPS versus right-handed pitching. Arrighetti is a guy who's had his ups and downs as a starting pitcher. His last game out, he kind of got roughed up a bit. Only scored you about 6 fantasy points, but the game before that, he did very well. Got you 26 points in that start. So a guy that against a couple of beatable teams this week in terms of like I said, how they handle right-handed pitching, I'd take a shot at Spencer Arrighetti. Okay,
so this is kind of letting the cat out of the bag once again, but I dropped an article just yesterday about pitchers that you want to stream tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
When there's only 7 games going on tomorrow. So the options are extraordinarily limited, but however, he is one of those guys. And you mentioned he only had, 6 fantasy points. That's because he got hit by a line drive.
Right, yeah, it had come out.
And so he got taken out of the game. He had
literally
come out
got
of the
hit
game.
hard. Yeah.
But according to him, he's fine. So he should make the start tomorrow. And if he does, and it's in San Francisco, and so that's a hitter's park against a hitters that aren't hitting for the most part.
Yeah, like I said, I look at their OPS versus right-handed pitching, how they've performed against right-handed pitching. I'm not scared away. I think he's got the stuff to handle them. And you brought up a good point there too, with only 7 games on the slate. When it's a depressed slate like we've had a lot of Mondays like that this season. It's been a weird schedule this season.
Yeah.
But especially beginning of the week, you've got a chance to get yourself jump out to a lead here this week. If you can get some guys in your lineup who actually have games tomorrow, if you've got the roster space available, pitching wise, hitting wise, whatever, if you can get some guys that actually are playing tomorrow and take advantage of your opponent not having some guys available, you can jump yourself out to a lead there, and then maybe you're playing from ahead.
Okay, so sometimes, as I mentioned to Vince, you just don't believe what you're getting ready to say next. But, okay, I'm actually going to recommend picking up a Colorado Rockies pitcher. Okay, and I know that's a tough gig a lot of times, but that pitcher is Cal Quantrill, who is at 9% rostered. And he's 5-4 with a 3.58 ERA. If you've got a 3.58 ERA as a Colorado pitcher, you are pitching. All right. And so he's at St. Louis on Wednesday. And St. Louis, even though they're playing better, their lineup is still not the best. And so he got hit by the Dodgers, but who doesn't? And
Right.
But his other 5 starts this week, he's given up 6 earned runs total in those 6 starts. And so in 29 innings, he's gone to the 6th inning and 4 straight starts in that period. So if you're looking for a guy who's available at 9%, he's a guy that can get you over the top. And, of course, I don't recommend, any Colorado or any pitcher really. Well, not really so, because the Colorado hitters aren't all that intimidating this year, even in Colorado. But don't recommend Colorado starting pitchers. So this is just this week only. Cal Quantrill this week is an ad for me. You add him, get him out after Wednesday, and then find yourself somebody else.
Sure enough.
All right. So
I got one more pitcher here.
Okay, go ahead.
Matt Waldron, knuckleballer here for the Padres that we talked about here. Listen, knuckleballer, so you can't go wrong with that. It's always fun to have a guy with a knuckleball on your team. But the guy's got an ERA under 2. He's got a whip under 1. His last 3 games, he's just been outstanding. He's got 2 earned runs total and 2 walks in his last 3 games combined. Guy's pitching like a champ. He's been going about 6 plus here, on the year. Being a soft tosser like that, he's not really stressing his arm a whole hell of a lot. So if he's rolling, they don't have to take him out just because his pitch count is getting up there. Matt Waldron, a guy, not only are his stats good coming into this week, but his start this week on Friday is going to come against those New York Mets that we talked about earlier. So fire that up here and pick yourself up some Matt Waldron if you're looking for a guy. He's still only rostered in less than 25% of leagues generally. So guys you should be able to find.
The last guy that I have is at 17% rostered. And once again, sometimes you can't believe what you're getting ready to say, but that's Jake Irvin of the Washington Nationals, who has a 3.12 ERA, even though he's only 4-5 on the season, a 1.03 whip. It doesn't get much better than that. And last 6 games, it looks like I lost Chase there. Hang on a second. Oh.
I'm back.
You're back. Okay.
What happened? We cut right up.
I don't know, but we're back in action. So I was mentioning about Jake Irvin. Last 6 starts, he's given up 10 runs, and this is his fantasy point, output: 13, 25, 22, and 22 in his last 4 starts. And he starts Wednesday at the Detroit Tigers. And we mentioned Detroit has slid off the map. And so if you're looking for pitching, that's a guy that I would certainly look to get on your team. And once again, I'm not sure I'm adding him any point past Wednesday, but he's certainly a guy that can help your team this week.
No, big time.
All right. So big time. So we're going to move to the drop section, and I'm going to lead off this one because you mentioned him as your ad. I have him written. Jordan Montgomery is who I'm talking about, and I understand who he is pitching against, and he is one of the ones that led me to my loss to you last week because he delivered me -7 fantasy points. So I was like, okay, so I'm willing to give him a little leeway, but in his next start, it crapped out again. He's got a 6.80 ERA, He's at 52.6% rostered. He's given up 14 earned runs in his last 6 innings pitched, -10 and -14 fantasy points. And so he's got to turn me around before I will go to the trough, so to speak. And I saw that you added him, and I'm like, okay, we are getting ready to do some saber rattling with this guy right here, because I want nothing whatever to do with him, especially in a 10-man league. If you're in a larger league, as I mentioned last week, you're pretty much stuck with Jordan Montgomery, because who are you going to drop him
Right.
for? But in a 10-man league, I'm glad you added him. You can have him. That's all I'll say about it.
Well, I have, in theory, because nothing's a given here in the fantasy world. I have, in theory, a little bit easier matchup next week. I can afford to experiment a little bit.
That's always important.
And as I said, he's got a good week coming up in terms of who he's facing in the Angels and the White Sox. A couple of lineups that shouldn't scare and don't scare anybody. If he was ever going to get right, it's this week. And if he does get right, if I can pick something like that up off the waiver wire, hey, good on it. And if it doesn't work out, I should be able to weather the storm this week with it, and no harm, no foul. So,
okay. So who do you have at the top of your list of drops?
O'Neal Cruz.
Okay.
I'm just ready to not have to hear about it.
Not hating on this one at all.
Yeah. Listen, he's been okay here the last week or so, but he's been so up or down. His metrics are all over the place. He still swings and misses at just about everything under the sun. He's fun to watch play baseball. He's 6'7", he runs like the wind, but I want a little bit more consistency in my lineup than that. He's only averaging about 1.5 a game. You can get that off the waiver wire. You can stream that off the waiver wire.
There are all kinds of shortstops. There are all kinds of shortstops this year.
Right.
Who have, and you mentioned he runs like the wind. Well, you got to hit the ball first.
You have to actually be on base if you're going to put that kind of speed to use, which, guy like I said earlier, I brought up Turang, and I don't mean to keep harping on the Brewers, but Turang's been getting on base, so he can actually use that speed and run. O'Neal Cruz, yeah. Again, another guy that, if he can reach his potential, that Pirate team, they could really use it. But yeah, I'm ready to be done with the O'Neal Cruz roller coaster for the time being here. So.
Okay, so this next guy I have been beating the drum on for about 3-4 weeks straight now. And one of our colleagues wrote an article this week that just blew my mind completely, saying that Reed Detmers is a buy low candidate. No, he isn't. I want nothing whatever to do with him. He's not even in the major leagues at present. This guy went from having a very good April to the most nightmarish May of all time. And so he's in AAA. He's not even on a roster, in a 10-man league. He has no business being on anyone's roster. He's finally come below 50%, but he's still at 46.8. That's way too high for him. Like I said, he's in AAA. So move on from Reed Detmers, and unless you're like you that have one loss, I guess, that can kind of just
can afford to experiment a little bit.
Yeah, but beyond that, even you, I don't think would waste your time with this guy. And so Reed Detmers, get him out of your team, get him out of your lineup, put him on the waiver wire, and just forget him.
Well, yeah. My next guy here, it shouldn't be a shock to anybody, but he continues to be rostered in over 50% of leagues. New York Mets, pretty much anybody that's on the New York Mets, just about, you can let go of and feel okay about, because none of them are hitting, none of them are playing all that well, unless they happen to trade Pete Alonso here coming up in the deadline or whatever. But Jeff McNeil, the second baseman for the Mets there, listen, he's barely, he's not even playing most days right now. He's been a little bit banged up lately. And listen, again, he's only getting you about 1.5 a game. You can get that off the wire. I know the dude was a batting champion a couple of years ago, but that is in the past. Let that ride. If you're really that hot and bothered to have a Met on your team, look at their young third baseman, Mark Vientos, actually, and you want to talk about hot ads lately. That dude's hitting over 300. He's widely available. He's only rostered about 10% of leagues right now. And that's a guy that at least has some potential for the future. McNeil, we know what we got. We know what you're getting, and it ain't going to be anything that to write home about. So that's another guy. I had him on my roster earlier this season. I'm glad I did move past him, but I see his name keeps getting battered around on the ad list in our own league. And I see he's still rostered in over 50% of leagues. There's no reason for that whatsoever. Let it go.
Yep, I agree with that because I was looking at him when they were getting ready to play in London.
Yeah.
But he plays no games against left-handed pitchers.
Yeah.
None. And the Mets faced 4 straight left-handers. He wasn't in the lineup for any of those 4 games.
Yeah.
So he is completely a platoon player and no thank
and
you.
not successful when he's in.
And not successful when I like the second base outfield that he can bring, but you got to get on base for that to
you have to actually put those tools to use to be able to use in a lineup, even if you have positional versatility. So, yeah.
All right. So I'm just going to throw this name out real quick. There's no reason to go into his stats or anything else, but that's Spencer Torkelson of the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah.
He's not even in the major leagues either.
Yep.
He was optioned to AAA. And this is a guy who's been long in potential for 3 years running now. And it just has not happened. And so he's at 36.5% rostered, which blows my mind altogether. And there's no reason for that. It needs to be more like 6.5%. All right. And so AAA means you have no business being on a roster, fantasy roster, or any roster for that matter. And so that completes my drop list. Do you have any other players?
No, that's it for me too. That's it for me too.
So let's go to our fantasy league here. And first of all, I'm pleased to report that I am winning my matchup. Okay, and so you took on Vince's dad this week, and pretty much put the ever-living slam on him. Let's see, you've got the top score of the week right here. So you're going to win. You've got 1 loss only. Vince is taking down the worst team in our league. So there's no real news flash there. Dan D'Amico, who is 1 loss like you.
The team that beat me. The guy that did beat me.
And I did beat him. He's got 1 loss because I beat him. So just throw that out there. And so he's going to win. And then Mr. Mike Brown, the co-founder of Belly Up, is taking down my good friend Nathan. And so this is a very competitive league. We've got, let's see, you 2 guys are at the top. You're making the playoffs. That's all great. Yay for you guys. And so we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 teams that are separated by a single game.
Yep.
Okay, so as I mentioned, very competitive league, and I've had to do some major, jumping around because I missed my number 1 draft pick and some other players that have been injured and stuff. But I'm still playing. I'm still in there. So, and as I explained to Nathan, and if you playing me in fantasy baseball, you better be ready for both barrels because I'm coming. And so that's still the case.
And I would point out that you've had some bad luck this season, but myself and you, top 2 scoring teams in the league so far this season.
That's right.
So it's not that you're not scoring points.
When you look at the points against, when you look at the points against, there are just a couple of teams that have given up more points or had more points scored against them than I have. So
I
played you twice already. So that was a heck of a stretch because I played Dan, then I played Vince, then I played you in back-to-back weeks.
And Dan, if I'm not mistaken, Dan was the league winner the year before me, correct?
That's right. Before you.
He's coming on strong this year again too.
So he knows what he's doing over there. I don't know if he's still in Pennsylvania or not, but he knows what he's doing. So tell us what you're up to right now and where we can find you.
Well, always you can find me at STT Chase FFB there on Twitter, X, whatever you choose to call it, because at this point, listen, if you want to choose to keep calling it Twitter, I am all on your bandwagon. But you can always find me there for fantasy football advice. I do talk a little bit of baseball. I will talk women's basketball, WNBA fantasy. I've been doing some of that this season.
Okay.
If you haven't been watching WNBA basketball, get over there and do it because it's fun to watch. It's good
That's right.
basketball. So I've been loving that. But yeah, you can find me there. You can find me most weeks it's Wednesday nights, but for Operation Domination, our fantasy football podcast there, you can find that on YouTube if you do that. This week we are going to be Thursday night though, talking with Mr. Bob Long from the Fantasy Football Expo about the AFC North division, and yeah, I'm going to preview that from a fantasy standpoint. So find me over there.
I expect you to talk up the Bengals. I'm just letting you know over there.
I'll try to talk up Burrow if nothing else.
Okay. So you can always find me on X or Twitter or whatever heck at Kevin62WILSEA. And as I mentioned at the top, I dropped an article yesterday, streamers for tomorrow. There are 2 of them, one of which we've talked about here. And so you're going to need to go to that article. And you can find that at the Belly Up Fantasy website, of course. And before that, I wrote an article about, as I mentioned at the top, that on Ronald Acuna's replacement. I'm pleased to report that is my most viewed article I have ever had on Reddit. It has over 50,000 views. I appreciate all you guys over there coming in. And when it comes to Reddit, that's kind of a hate-love relationship because they will tell you exactly what they think, good or bad.
Yeah, there's no holding back over there.
Yeah, there's no holding back over there, which I'm fine with that. And I appreciate everybody that comes and checks out my articles. And so you can know for sure that there's another article coming this week that I think I'm going to look at some catchers who you might want to look at, because the catcher position, as usual, is either you have one or you're in the ditch. So you can look forward to that article being dropped at some point this week. And but other than that, we want to thank everyone who has joined us here today. I'd like to thank our closer who came in and saved the game, slammed the door. And of course, that's my good friend Chase. I appreciate you coming on the show, Chase, and any words of encouragement to send us out of here.
No, hey, well, I was glad to be here. Yeah, like I said, glad to be back. Glad to see you again. And yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody. Be sure to check out the sponsors down below. Use those promo codes. Get yourself some deals over there.
Okay, I should have mentioned that. I'm sorry, Vince. Okay. Of course, that's Righteous Felon Jerky. Okay.
There you go.
And you go there, Sports Stove. You get your 15% off right there. And I don't know if you've had their jerky. It's very, very, very good. And of course, Belly Up Sports Fantasy side is a sponsor of us. And SeatGeek, if you put Belly Up Sports in there, you'll get $20 off your order. Your first, and you mentioned about going into WNBA games, which I'm going to my very first one this Saturday coming up.
Really?
Never been to never had any interest in WNBA. You know, I kept kind of, a view of it.
Right.
But this year, I watched my first game last week. It was the Fever and Chicago Sky.
Yeah.
And but it's going to be the Connecticut Sun and the Dallas Wings.
Well, you're catching the right team because Connecticut's good.
So
Connecticut's good.
That's right. And so, as I mentioned, get over there to the SeatGeek, put your Belly Up Sports in there, get your $20 off. And so, apologize for not putting that out there before now, but
we got it. No harm,
thanks for bringing that to my attention, Chase. And so, no harm, no foul. And so like I said, we appreciate you all joining us here today. And everybody have a great week going forward. And we'll see you then.